Just One Thing is a podcast with both feet firmly placed in the world of events and the creative industries, presented by me, Mel Noakes.
And me, Max Fellows.
It's a podcast from Elevate, where industry trailblazers write a letter to their younger selves.
And consider what wise words of advice they would give themselves now, if only they could.
Our discussion is all based on this letter. Be prepared for refreshingly honest conversations and words of wisdom.
Ali Owen is an inclusion activist, digital leader and founder of the award-winning social enterprise Brixton Finishing School, an accelerator that finds, trains and places underrepresented talent into roles within the media, creative and digital industries.
With 30 years' experience in the media and advertising industries, Ali amassed her early experience working with the likes of The Guardian, MailOnline, Yahoo and Unruly. Brixton Finishing School's award-winning family of courses she founded include the flagship Summer School in London, ADcademy, the virtual programme. This programme gives over 2,500 students a year across the UK a fairer chance to succeed. Adventure, a schools programme, aims to introduce 100,000 diverse 14 to 18-year-olds to the industry, and Visible Start is for women over 45.
Ali is on a mission to disrupt the elite media and advertising industry so that it includes all voices and gives them the opportunity to thrive. She said talent is distributed equally, but opportunities are not. Ali is a force of nature and a force for change, and we can't wait to welcome her to the sofa. Welcome, Ali.
Thank you so much. Thanks for that incredible build-up as well.
What was quite nice about it, sat here glancing over, was this slight kind of jiggery and smiles that were coming from you as well as we were kind of doing that.
Do you know what? Weirdly, despite being in the spotlight, I'm not comfortable with being front of stage. I'm much better orchestrating things from behind the scenes.
But hearing all of that, how does that feel?
It feels like it's a miracle, if I'm going to be honest. I started this in my kitchen on a credit card and a remortgage about 8 years ago. And at that point, I had no experience in education or activism. You know, I was just a very cross woman, right. Basically. And to see that idea that I was going to build this different way, rebuild a system I felt we'd lost, a system that was more meritocratic, that was about talent rather than type. That was kind of, people are like, oh, no, it was a bit of a dream, but I was really determined. And to hear you say that sometimes, because I'm still in the same kitchen, I'm still paying off that remortgage, though I haven't got much left. It's just a miracle that we've done it, really, and that there's something there that gives people an equal chance.
So those that don't know you, and obviously we've given an intro, but
shall I say
in your words, I suppose, and who you are and what you've accomplished or what you're doing, and
a little bit about Brixton Finishing.
Yeah.
Shall I say? So I'm Ali. I'm a single mum. I live on an estate in Dalston, which is part of East London. I am a classic socially mobile ginger person. There you go. Just add in a bit of spice there. Yeah. I was very lucky. I was the first in my family to go to uni, and I fell into advertising. I'd never heard of it, but I was temping, and I temped a day in a publishing house, and that's how I discovered this hidden world. And as soon as I discovered it, I thought, I want a bit of that. And I'm a natural born hustler, so I got in. And after about 25 years of doing advertising, it was quite clear to me that the level playing field was not level. And I wanted to do something to make things more equitable. So I set up Brixton Finishing School to build accessible pathways for all types of talent into the industry, to support them when they arrive, and to get, really amazing talents in up to the top. So we actually have an industry that reflects all the wonderful communities in our country, rather than just some. Yeah.
Which is incredible. And we talked a little bit before coming on air and recording, just where some of that sort of hustler, can-do, resilience came from. So tell us a little bit about your early years, and in particular, you mentioned your dad and the influence he played on you.
So looking back, at the time, I thought it was I thought my upbringing was boring, and it was too average. Turned out my upbringing was not average at all. My dad Tony, Owen, or the governor, as he likes to be called occasionally.
At the pub or at home.
Or just he goes around and calls people Squire. All right, Squire. Stuff like that. He was a central heating apprentice. He left school at 14, was always told he was not very clever, turned out to be dyslexic, and probably, when we go into this later, very neurodiverse as well. But so he became a central heating apprentice, like engineer, did that, and ended up doing engineering and stuff. But he had 2 daughters. That was me, I'm the oldest, and my sister. And we grew up in the 70s and 80s. And at no point did he ever suggest there were girls' jobs and boys' jobs. I had Lego and engineering kits. He always told me I could be whatever I wanted. He was really keen on education. And it was an absolute shock to me when I entered the workforce and I discovered in my first big job in media, I was at the Daily Mirror, there was a floor of 60 men and only 3 women, of which I was one and the youngest by quite a long time. And I just didn't understand it. And I look back, and he was a feminist, probably not what people would view as a feminist, but he had a much brighter older sister, and she wasn't allowed to go into further education and stuff. She really wanted to. And I think it was his way of maybe healing what he saw growing up to give us the chances he did. I spent a lot of my early career shocked because it never occurred to me that women and men weren't just the same and that we were just as bright as each other and just as capable.
What a gift your dad gave you to have that confidence. And you talk a lot about growing up in Liverpool and being the first to go to university.
Yeah.
So what was that like for you and your family? Because that's a real milestone.
Yeah, I mean, again, when I was really little, so I grew up on the South Coast, my mum's a Scouser, but from about 3 or 4, I was told I was going to uni. Regardless of, nobody ever asked me if I wanted, it was just conditioned into me. My mum and dad had, my mum moved from Liverpool, she was bright when she was 14, down to Essex, and she didn't get to do her O-levels or anything like that because it was different curriculum. So both my dad and my mum lost educational chances. And I think with me and my sister, they just wanted us to have a really different experience. They wanted us to think. And I think it never occurred to me I was the first one, again, because if somebody tells you that's what you're going to do from day one, if they set that expectation, you think that's what everybody does. And again, it's only when you come out the other side and you reflect back and go, oh, you were just grooming me for higher education.
You buggers.
Oh my God, you made me believe I could do it. But yeah, so there was that, and there was a lot of other self-reliance. So weirdly, I paid half for every one of my birthday presents from the age of 7.
Hang on, you paid for half of them?
So from 7, you paid half for every birthday present, and you would make that money either from your christening or your birthday money, or you do jobs around the house, but you were always responsible for your finances. So when we get on to, why I was good at hustling, the first, at my 7, I wanted a camera, and back then you had this thing called a brownie camera. It's like, you get a little roll of film, and Dad went, well, if you want it, pay half. So I had to learn how to, obviously they came with me, go down the post office, take out half my christening money and contribute that, but learning about that. So I think for me...
Understanding value, isn't it, I suppose, at that time?
Yeah, understanding money needs to be earned, and you, even though, as a female, you earn the money you provide. And again, I realised that's quite unusual. I mean, I have a 19-year-old daughter. She's never paid half for a birthday present. Just to let you know.
I can imagine most people listening to this would have never paid half for a birthday present.
Yeah, but again, it would never occur to, again, we grew up like that. It would never occur to me that you wouldn't contribute.
Yeah.
That it wouldn't partly be your responsibility to get the things you want. Yeah. And I think when you look back, it's as if it was some kind of weird science experiment. That maybe they were like, those Swedish psychologists were like, let's take 2 twins and teach one thing one. But I think they just knew life was going to be hard. And by choosing to do this stuff, they gave me an innate advantage because I never thought that was anything, hard work or grafting or hustling or making my own way was anything but what you did.
Did you and your sister want to go to university then, as you kind of realised it in your teens or early teens into it? Or did you feel like I wanted to rebel? Because you've been told you were doing it, actually, you kind of...
Where we grew up, and I'm really sorry, if anybody knows where I grew up, was a bit of a shithole. Am I allowed to swear?
Yeah. You can do what you want.
So, I could not wait to leave. I realised as a ginger girl on the south coast, nobody's going to marry me. That was one exit. The other exit available was education. So I was going to go uni.
Where on the south coast? Can we just qualify?
Okay, so I know, because I've got to go back there and at some point. But it's actually the most deprived district in Hampshire I grew up in. So, yeah, it's actually... Oh, don't Google it. Don't, because it's not, this was obviously my experiences. Things are much improved.
Yeah.
But it was a kind of place where if you did well at education, people would be really angry at you. I remember when I was going to go to uni.
It was a resent you type thing?
Yeah, well, people basically not, it was, what can I say? It was pretty rough. So when I got my place at uni, people actually said, if you go uni, you're saying this place is no good. Like you're disrespecting this place. Yeah. And you're like, that is insane. But I'm going to go uni. Why? Because of that kind of stuff. Yeah. Because this is insane what you're saying.
So we're at this level. We need to keep everybody else at this level.
I think it's that. Well, it's a kind of islander mentality. Yeah. If you are from something, you don't have a lot, that kind of tribal gang mentality. Stick together. Don't you go thinking you're better than us. It actually, what it does is it reinforces lack of potential, lack of opportunity fulfillment. Because it's a kind of embattled state of mind. And I understand why you think that. Because you've got nothing, all you've got is what you've got. So therefore you defend it. But what it does is it stops a lot of people rising. Or in my case, I was so allergic to that particular fish tank. I jumped out and decided, you've got to push away from the edge of the swimming baths and trust that you can swim to get anywhere.
And how did those early years and early experiences fuel you through university? Because one thing that comes out in your letter a lot is this sense of resilience, can do, go and make it. How much of that came to the fore at uni?
I found uni really easy after those early experiences. People were nice. And it was just a different world. I mean, living in Liverpool, it's a big Irish population, lots of different types of people. I felt really at home there. Liverpool at that point was a really deprived city. There was like areas that the police didn't go into. I lived in Toxteth. I think there was massive unemployment, but, that was fine. I know, not obviously fine but that was, it wasn't in any way. I felt quite at home. And it also meant if you were a hustler, you could hustle. And so I had a really good time. I learnt loads. I've still got loads of friends now that I went to uni with 30 years later. Weirdly, we've all just been diagnosed as being on the neurodiverse spectrum. In our
entire friendship of group.
Pretty much, yes. It's, birds of a feather flock together, and it's been amazing. Like me and one of my best mates, Ben, who's from Muswell Hill, both was diagnosed ADHD within 7 days of each other, And
has that diagnosis changed the way that you think about things, or has it made sense of things? Because we hear quite a lot in the news at the moment around people that are diagnosed later in life. So what impact has that had?
I really needed it because I think especially as a woman, when you go later in life and your hormones change, whatever neurodiversity you have becomes really pronounced, and it can be quite, even if you managed it, it becomes much harder to manage, and not many people talk about that. Also, it makes a lot of sense of the fact that I don't really have a sense of risk. That's partly my background as well, that incredible belief that I can get through anything, which actually is not necessarily, some situations that's great, other situations you should really just leave. You don't have to prove you can survive in it, you can just leave. So I definitely think it makes sense of some of the challenges I found within some more corporate structures. It makes sense of why I'm doing what I'm doing now. Because I do think it takes probably a different wired mind to see a way of doing things that is not there. But I'm sure lots of people, given some thought, could think of a better way of doing a lot of things that we do at the moment. So I don't think I'm that special in that sense. It's more, yeah.
I'm going to challenge that back, though, and say, actually, I think it is quite special. I got diagnosed about 3 years ago, and dyslexic. So you add the two together, and yeah, you have some fun. It's what I've seen it to be is that it gives you a validation, perhaps the way that you're thinking. It doesn't stop the frustrations of not working the way that other people do.
Yeah.
But your point there about not doing things perhaps the same way, or thinking or seeing things perhaps the same way as others, to the point where it's given you a unique kind of blended A viewpoint and B then approach when you then kind of stick onto that, to the graft and the resilience. A bit of a kind of a superpower in that respect, where actually someone else, and I'm going to ask you a little bit about the activism piece and that resilience and that drive to do something or stand up for what you believe to be right. But I see it very much then as actually there's not many other people who could do what you're doing in the way that you're doing it, in the topic and kind of creating the impact that you have. And I think that's, Steve Bartlett did his talk recently, talked about skill stacks. And, you know, Ronaldo, as an example, is not the best footballer in terms of pace, in terms of his strength of this, that and the other. But it's when you kind of lay out that actually his work ethic, and then actually he's good at kicking the ball and things like that, and he's quite
kind of helpful for a footballer.
And things like this. Well, it then kind of, you're 1 in 8 million, and then the next one makes you 1 in 800,000, and the next skill stack onto it, the kind of this dynamism or this unique kind of DNA makes you 1 in 800. And you see kind of the more kind of things, the layers, if you like, make you unique. So I challenge you back to say, actually, it's probably only you that could be doing what you're doing.
I'm just thinking how good Ronaldo would be if he actually played for Arsenal. That's the final missing link.
You're a Gooner as well. It could be all right. Don't worry.
Yeah, it could be all right. Yeah. Do you know what? The act of writing the letter made me realise, because I suppose my dad has got this brilliant phrase, which I think anybody who's neurodiverse may recognise. He'd be like, fully paid up member of the awkward squad, which is a good thing. And also, if you're throwing shade, not a good thing. But basically, fully paid member of the awkward squad will just be bloody awkward. Why? Because I can. And that could be standing up. But actually, definitely I think some of the stuff we do now around championing other voices, standing up, would just be called being awkward in corporate life 20 or 30 years ago. It wasn't acceptable. So it's kind of grown. Do I think I could do this if I hadn't had the mix of stuff I've had? No. Because I think definitely to go through it, you have to have a blind focus and belief within it. Yeah. Otherwise, you're not going to get it done when it's hard.
And creating something like Brixton Finishing School, I know that you talked about the resilience and obviously your dad being that supporter and things like that. Is there something that happened, a penny drop moment when you thought, next to this isn't good enough, or actually I've been through a career of, and looking back I could have helped others, or what's the seed, or was it a incident, was it a period of time, what kind of created it?
I think it was a gradual unfolding and an unfurling of realisation. I think with any kind of, in my personal experience, that light bulb moment is the result of many sparks, normally. Not that light bulbs have sparks, but let's just hang on to that analogy. So throughout my career, obviously when I first got in, gender was the big thing because there wasn't any women and it was just crap. But, I was built for war, so let's crack on. And then, obviously, that kind of got a little bit, well, I wouldn't say it's got completely better, but then I went through maternity, etc. Then I realised class and, obviously, the race element as well. Where I live in Dalston is full of very normal people, but when I go in one of my workspaces, those people aren't represented. And I think I was in survivor mode when I was younger and probably not seeing as much of the stuff because you can't really believe you're in these spaces anyway because you're like a pioneer from where you're from. But as you come to realise how odd it is that there's only a certain type of person in a space and that space is supposed to market to everybody, you kind of go, well, that's a bit odd. And then, stuff went down that pissed me off, not going to lie.
Can you say what? Or
I'm going to give two examples. Yes. These are one of my favourite examples. I was at a national newspaper, and I didn't realise it, but I was the token socially mobile person. I obviously thought that these people weren't that good because I'd had to work a lot harder than them. They'd just been given their jobs. So I had a kind of slightly innate sense of superiority. But to them, I was the token working class person. And a girl joined the team I was on, and she went to school. She went to King Charles's school, obviously, because we're talking that level of posh, yeah? We're not talking like grammar school. We're talking that level of posh at these places. And I remember she didn't speak to me for the first week. Didn't speak to me. And I said to my colleague, we're on the same team, and I said to my colleague, why won't X speak to me? She went, oh, Ali, she's never met anybody like you before, has she? And I sort of went, and then she effed something up the next day, and I obviously stepped in and negotiated with the person above her, and then she was in my pocket. But in that moment, I realised two things. One, my colleague was not surprised that she wasn't speaking to me, whereas I was. And number two, the colleague just made it my problem. It wasn't, nobody was saying to her, what are you doing not speaking to your colleague? It was perfectly acceptable because she hadn't met anybody like me before, to not have a conversation when you sat opposite somebody. And I think for me, obviously I just railroaded through that and carried on, but then you reflect as you look back and you think, actually, that was really a bit shit, wasn't it? That wasn't very fair. And then the final bit, so obviously that you pick up these things, like these, debris type thing.
I'm just visually seeing you as this bulldozer just ploughing through this visual
But it's really interesting to me that you have that sense of, you had that resilience in you at such a young age, because like you say, to be in places like that, you were a pioneer. Not many people were from places that you were from. To have that sense of, I'm going to go and do it anyway, and actually it's all good. And actually it was only in the reflecting back that
I wonder if it's my neurodiversity. I think it's one, growing up somewhere really rough, where you're used to just crap all the time. So actually, unless somebody's really in your face, that's not dangerous. Somebody being a bit off to you. I've had recently occasionally somebody will point out to me that somebody's being rude to me and I won't have noticed. Why? I remember, give you an analogy, I was at Glastonbury once with these sound engineers and they were all shouting at each other really loudly. And I thought they were an argument. But no, they're sound engineers. They'd gone deaf, hadn't they? So that's just how they shout, because that's the level they operate at. And I wonder with me, because I'd been so used to war, that I just operated at a level that meant it was not, unless there was, threat to life. I probably, it wasn't to say I wasn't upset occasionally or frustrated, but definitely those more, if you're not, unless you say it to my face, I'm probably not going to notice.
Would you say from and I want to hear the second example as well, but this bulldozer cruising through and obviously getting things out the way and looking back and there's the rubble and debris that you talk about. Emotionally, was it always, or has it been a kind of, the armour, if you like, or the strength of this kind of bulldozer and actually not going to allow people to upset you? Did it upset you? Or actually it's kind of like you take that quietly away or visibly?
I think, obviously you're upset, but the reality is, as a single parent, I hate to say it, you can't be so egotistic to let things piss you off because you've got to provide. I think when you think about the concept of who can make a fuss, well, some people can make a fuss and other people just need to hold on to their jobs and pay the mortgage that month. And I think there was an element of that in my early career. And obviously Brixton is the ultimate example of making quite a big fuss, isn't it? But when I set Brixton up, was my daughter had hit 11, and one of the reasons I could do it was she went to big school and I didn't have to pay mortgage and childminder, which meant one of my biggest financial debts was off the table, which meant I could take a risk. Up to that point, I was in this surviving mode where if I didn't make money that month, everything stopped.
For 11 odd years.
Yeah. Probably a bit more than that when you think about it before as well.
Yeah.
And the reason, the moment that kind of coagulated Brixton in my mind was I was at another national newspaper and they employed Katie Hopkins. If anybody's familiar with her.
I think everyone might be.
So thank you, Katie. Thank you for being employed by this. And I was running a really big revenue line that was contributing quite heavily to that paper. And I just became really aware of how complicit I was within the fact that, in a way, in my head, I was like, I'm kind of paying her salary. And when I was younger, I was an activist in my teens. I did a lot of I did the poll tax riots. I did lots of stuff. Poll tax activism, because they said it was a riot. Maybe it was. But I did a lot of stuff. And as I got dragged into corporate life, I stopped fighting for my own and other people's rights and kind of went into survival mode. And in that moment of her being employed and me suddenly having that moment of going, I'm going to pay somebody to be complicit in my own degradation, because that's kind of what I kind of think. If you write horrible things about people, you're trying to degrade them, aren't you? And she does write, don't know, am I allowed to? Allegedly, she writes, because we know she likes suing people. I've heard it told, though it may not be true, that allegedly she sometimes writes things about people that aren't very nice. Yeah.
I think you're safe on that one, to be
honest. To be honest.
Can't pin it.
Yeah. Caveated, there'll be some stuff in the show notes, just in case.
Yeah. Can we check with the show notes?
Those types of people, in part, it's purely for the attention now, and it's to stir up a reaction.
But you see how words become violence.
Yeah.
Right?
Oh, yeah. Those echo chambers, and actually the wrong people pick them up and use it as fuel.
We know when somebody creates hate speech about somebody else that is, as you rightly say, Mel, translated into a physical outcome. Words become deeds. Yeah, thoughts become words that become deeds, and those deeds hurt people. An example of that is perhaps the terrible violence that's happening around the trans population at the moment. That's been stoked by really horrible sentiments, people saying terrible things, and that translates as horrendous outcomes for people.
So talk to us a bit about being an inclusion activist.
Ooh, I know. What a funny old job title. So basically, I'm a woman that does stuff rather than talks about it. So I take actions. So that makes me an activist. So if anybody listening takes actions, you're an activist too. Please own the word. And for me, inclusions, maybe in my own little head, again, I don't think the same as it. Everybody needs to be included because it's better for society if we all are. Certainly we know that when you include everybody in a business, people are happier. Businesses make a lot more money. I think if you've got a management team that's diverse and inclusive, you make 10% more than a company who doesn't have a diverse management team. And you're more innovative, all the things that say the kind of broadly the creative industries, marketing, advertising, comms, need to be good at, innovation, teamwork, coming up with ideas, engaging people. It's only possible if you actually get everybody in it. But not everybody in it and psychologically safe to say what they think about a brief or a pitch, an idea. Yeah. So for me, it made sense. Where I live, the street I live on, it's literally up the road from the studio. I was the only one that had a career on that street. Everybody else had jobs, child minding, bit of cleaning. And people on that street, two of the girls, there's only 67 houses, two of the young ladies got firsts, but they couldn't get jobs. Now, when you look from my street, the end of my street down Kingsland High Street, you can actually see the Shard and the Gherkin. But it's as if, I describe it as a sieve that only lets a certain type of a grain of rice, a certain type of rice through, and the rest of that is held back. It's like a wrong sieve, like talent's held out. And I just thought that was just an appalling waste of talent, a waste of investment in education, a waste of potential. Yeah. So, I mean, to get a first and to not get a job, you think that would be unusual. It is not. It is not.
So how did you turn that drive, that awareness then? You're seeing this firsthand. You've gone through your own career and some of the highs, lows, and talked a bit about the darker side of things, which we might touch on later. But how did you then turn that activism, that belief into action? And what did that action kind of look like in those earlier stages?
So I started telling people what I was going to do. Now, bear in
mind, threat or as a promise?
Bear in mind, I hadn't really thought it through. So there was no business plan written down.
But is this though? You almost soundboarding out. Yeah, manifesting is another one. Yeah, enough people hear about it and go, actually, that's a good idea. Or you should
started telling people. I said, right, I'm going to set this thing up. That was going to be, it's going to be a free course, and we're going to find 18 to 25-year-olds. We're going to give them free training in the industry, and then we're going to give them jobs. And then I went on Canva.
We love Canva.
Bear in mind, I have zero design skills, and I designed the most crap logo ever. And I discovered that most companies will let you put £4,999 on a credit card without a CFO sign-off. So I bought an iZettle machine, and I went round people I knew with my crap logo and my manifesto, and I persuaded them to do it without the CFO sign-off. Give you some money. And people bought in, and one person bought in. Then
people buying in agencies, that type of thing.
Yeah.
Brands,
so the first round, McCann London, Clear Channel, Visium, Pretty Green, big names. But it was people who knew me from my career, who also had maybe experienced or were allies to what other people had experienced. And also because in my career, I'd worked really hard and I'd never ripped anybody off in a deal that I know of. Apologies if you think I have. Yeah, because I'm not perfect. People were willing to take a punt. But the magical thing I did, which again, I didn't think through, I just said what I thought would work, was you gave me the money, you helped me but in exchange for that, you had to recruit somebody from the pilot project, and you had to give them a job for a year on a salary in the early 20s. So it was way over the London living wage at that point, which then made you completely complicit that person had to be actually quite good, which made you very interested in how I was going to find the people and what I was going to teach them, which then made you part of the kind of crew. So I got everybody who had ever sold media with me to phone up a load of sixth forms and colleges and community groups. Say, we're doing this. I went around a couple of local media outlets and job centres. I met with Mark Lewis, who ran the School of Communication Arts, and he was, brilliant and said, you can have my space in the summer. And then there's an amazing woman called Lynette Murphy, said, she used to be, I think, at Ravensbourne. She was incredible. She helped mentor the course. And we kind of patched this course together that was a third critical thinking, a third the dark arts of the office, because that's where you're going to F up, really are, and a third the ecosystem. But everything was actually delivered by the employers themselves. And obviously then, so the people that put the money in then had to, if they wanted to take an account exec, well, you've got to teach them how to be an account exec then. So we started with 24 young people from the groups we deal with, and I looked at loads of census data. I used to be a strategist, so I looked at that point, the 2011 census, and then I looked at stats within the industry, and I worked out which communities were furthest from work, and that became my outreach blueprint, which we now revise every year. But the first one was 80% global majority, multicultural, with 60% Black heritage, because that's a real talent shortage, and then 20% white socially mobile in London. So we focused on that. We got 24 young people. Of those, I think 18 wanted to go into work, and 95% of them got a job. And some of them are still in industry and have gone on to win awards. So that was...
sense of pride then, and you track them or keep an eye on
Yeah,
them?
all of the WhatsApp groups still.
Right.
Yeah, most of them. Some of them have done a couple of years and maybe it's not for them. You have to remember as well, we've got a lot of work to do in industry before we are completely inclusive. So we started with that, then it kind of scaled dramatically, rapidly, with COVID being probably one of the biggest opportunities I seized. I think 2 weeks after we locked down, I read a Polly Toynbee article in The Guardian where she was like, graduate opportunities are disappearing. And I was like, well, if Polly says that about graduates, what about everybody else? They are going to be truly buggered. So I phoned up a campaign. Again, I didn't think this through. I did it and thought it will just happen. Welcome to neurodiversity. And I said, I'm going to launch a national version of Brixton Finishing School that's going to be virtual. And they said, well, okay, Ali, that's fine. Yeah, you'll probably do it. You've done the first one. What are you going to call it? And I was like, okay, think of a really snappy name. What does Lily go to? My daughter went to an academy. So I went, the ADcademy. And they printed the article and I was like, oh, bugger, it looks like I'm building a national school now. Yeah. Great.
Called the
ADcademy. I quite liked it, to be honest. It was good.
I know, we still got it. We still got that as a name. And that was really amazing because we did an industry crowdfunder and people put in their own personal money, like 20 quid, 15 quid. People put, brands came on board like KFC and GSK, and the academy opened. So we launched, I said I'd do it. I think we locked down March 23. Polly's article came out April and the academy officially virtually opened Feb 2021. So just under a year.
So just under a year.
Mm.
And I've got so many questions, my brain is popping.
Whilst Mel's thinking, did you, when you took that leap, you've been in graft mode, survival mode. Lily's gone to a
secondary.
I was going to say bigger school, but not talking to my kids at the moment.
Big school.
You took a risk or did you, in terms of you had your job and you kept your job and this was a side hustle or project or otherwise, or did you go all in?
I couldn't go all in until a bit later that year. So I actually was still doing I was working 7 days, but I was doing doing Brixton, but the money for Brixton was going on Brixton. But I was also working, I set up a separate little mini agency called Hoxton United that I was doing like digital marketing through. And that kind of funded me while I got Brixton going. And I think I didn't really take the leap to 100% Brixton until about year 3. And only recently, in the last 2 years, after counselling for workaholicism, have I managed to get down below a 5-day week. Yeah, because I think you get used to just being on.
And that was one of the things in your letter because I think a lot of people in our industry will resonate with that, especially of our generation, that work hard, play hard, work harder sort of mentality. And you talk a lot about self-care and the need to rest and that resting isn't a break and isn't like selling out.
Challenging.
So hard. I wrote a whole book on it.
I need to read your book.
Plug it harder, go on.
Yeah, what's your book called?
I won't plug it here, but I'll tell you afterwards. But it's, but I think so many people in our industry learnt that, you're only as good as how many hours you're putting in that presenteeism and staying late and the pitching. And the industry was very much around this sort of always on mentality for a long time. And it does feel like it's changing, but I think a lot of it is changing because people like you and others are speaking up and going, actually, just because we earn our stripes in that way doesn't necessarily mean the next generation should.
I tell my team, like, when you're in work hours, working, but, you're not allowed to do any work past 5:30. And if you work a bit after 5:30, you get that time back. Like, there's no unpaid overtime. And for me, it's like, I've still got some bad habits, but I'll send a WhatsApp and I will say, do not reply. Just because I can't get over this doesn't mean you shouldn't, because I don't, for me that, it makes you ill. And I definitely think from my background, you graft because there is no safety net. Then you get in a career where that's a positive, so you're conditioned. And it took me a long time and a lot of getting over a lot of anxiety about working less to be able to pull back. I wouldn't say on the resting bit, as somebody from an early age who was told productivity was safety, which is essentially what I was programmed into. If you're working, if you're doing, if you're providing, you're going to be safe. Because there's a huge intergenerational fear in that conditioning. Yeah. I wouldn't say I've got there yet, but I'm getting better.
Well, I'm sat here listening, going, "This exactly." I mean, I'm exactly that, and this rest piece is the guilt factor that you get with it. And then, if you're running your own business or businesses, there is always stuff to do. So if you're not doing it, then you are ignoring, or you are, you're not giving something the attention it needs or deserves.
It's your name above the door. I think that's it. It's your name above the door, and I think,
and it grows at the rate that you're willing to encourage it or make it happen, right? Which is.
And I think what I've got to now is we have a really strong team at Brixton Finishing School now, and really strong partners. I've got a really strong advisory board and trustees. There's definitely a village. And what's been really good is I've really just been focusing on future-proofing it. So if I disappeared tomorrow, I'm not saying I'm planning to, but nobody knows what's going to happen in life. It could still continue. And I think that's the key thing. So I think some entrepreneurs are like, got to keep, it's me, and I'm like, well, you've got to build it so it can survive without you. And I sort of think, if in 50 years, when I definitely won't be here, unless, I don't know, I'm cryogenically frozen or something, it was still going, because let's face it, I don't think we'll have sorted everything out in 50 years, having done, having looked back, then that would be amazing. I'd be really chuffed with that. That and a cul-de-sac named after me, please.
Cul-de-sac.
Or a road on the south coast.
Tony Bear's got a close in Highbury, and every time I go by, I go, I'd really love a cul-de-sac.
You heard it here first, the Owen cul-de-sac coming to you.
What's been the hardest thing? What are the hardest moments or the hardest thing about setting this up?
I mean, there's been so much harder stuff. I think at the very beginning, it was the financial insecurity. I did this without any capital. I did this with, a credit card and a remortgage as a single parent. So there were moments where I woke up at 4 a.m. just having a panic attack. And then I think I just compartmentalised any doubt that I had. Because if you're doing that, you're not going to be effective the next day. So I think I kind of pressed every emotion down for a couple of years. And I think what's been quite nice in the last couple of years, but it's been a bit safer, is I've had to kind of feel the feelings. All that stuff that you shove down, it doesn't go anywhere. It's going to have to come out. Yeah. So I've done a lot of work around, feeling all the feelings, dealing with that. And I think now my life has been a whole series of events, but if I changed one of those events, maybe I wouldn't be where I am today. And I'm all right with where I am today. Yeah.
I like that. You mentioned in your letter that beautiful, and I'm not going to try and say it. Are you going to try
Shall we all try and say it?
Let's try and say it.
It's
Kintsugi. Is it? So, Kintsugi. Yeah. I'd like to apologise to the Japanese nation and any Japanese speakers out there.
Or offence caused by
I'm trying my best to say Kintsugi, which is, and I love this because I'm really into this stuff. If you break something in Japan and you love that thing, you can put it back together but make it more beautiful if you break a plate, by mending it with gold. So you kind of So I just love that you can kind of melt down gold and use that as the glue to glue back an object.
Celebrate the imperfections.
Yeah. And make it more valuable. Yeah, celebrate the fact that has been broken and healed.
Yeah.
And still here and being used and
honoured. And that healing is honoured. Yeah. And I think in a way, building Brixton, I didn't think of this at the time. It's only now, me as a wise woman, 8 years in, looking back, it's been an incredibly healing process. I think what's great about Brixton as well is a lot of the people, the partners we have and the trustees and the advisors and the mentors and supporters, they're giving back to the next generation because they want to just give them a better experience than they had. So they're either healing something in themselves or they're healing something that they saw happen to their colleagues. I just think that's really nice because if you can't, by taking action to mend something that happened, that in itself is a step forward. You're no longer stuck in it.
So do you see then those that aren't being complicit in the ongoing challenges and issues that we have?
Some people don't give a crap,
Right.
Yeah, I would say I do. And do you know what? Why should they? It's not affecting them. They're benefiting from the current structure. Yeah, I always say the industry's split into thirds. Yeah, there's a third. I describe it as the solar system. Yeah, third of planets are teeming with life. They're amazing places. They're in this. They're all about inclusion. They want to do it. They're on the journey. A third are kind of like, oh, I really would like to do something. I'm going to try. I'm just a bit nervous, but they want to go. And a third of the kind of solar system is just lifeless, white, dead planets that have got no interest in this because the system works the way it does for them. Now, we know that some people don't buy into it because there is no reason financially why this is not a thing you would do. When we look at some of the, people are going, oh my God, there's a slump. Well, if we know that if you have a diverse management team that produces 10% more earnings before interest and tax than a non-diverse management team, I'd press that lever. I probably wouldn't stop having biscuits at meetings or whatever cutbacks you're going to do, yeah? I'd do the big one, plus 10%. If I know, like Deloitte says, that my team is 83% more innovative if I'm inclusive and people feel psychologically safe, and I know that I am in a creative business where ideas, engagement matter, I press that button. The reason those buttons aren't being pressed is the reason because some people like the structures as they are because you can be type over talent, yeah?
They might get found, or equally it's that.
Well, do you know, there's always going to be brands that like that.
And people are scared of change as well.
But there's, you've got amazing brands like Diageo or Nike. There's lots of brands who embrace. At the end of the day, the people who are going to change this industry are the people setting the ad budgets. If I am a brand, if I'm a top 100 brand, I get to decide who spends my money and takes a cut of my gravy or whatever you want to call it. So I can decide the rules of engagement for that. I can say, what's your gender pay gap? I can say, what's your ethnicity pay gap? I can say, what's your social mobility pay gap? For example, Marketing Week did a thing on brand marketing teams. The social mobility pay gap is 15.9%. Ethnicity is 4%. But all these things, if you set, if you're a brand and you're deciding who you're going to engage with, why engage with people that aren't doing the work that needs to be done? Obviously, you need to do it yourself as well. We can't just sit in a greenhouse and throw stones at other people. But if we wanted to sort this out, if I, as a single mum with no money, can do what I've done, imagine what could be done if somebody had £1 billion or even $1 million.
Yeah. So well said, isn't it? We've got kind of a couple of questions left before we wrap up and hear the big one. But you're obviously engaging huge amounts of talent, and there's that 100K number that Mel read out earlier. What is then success? What is the marker of a job well done for you and the team? And where is that now, and where is that in the future?
Do you know what? I used to think it was just scaling, but actually in the last year we've become a lot more thoughtful, and it is about changing that top tier. So it is about for me, at the kind of schools level, it's every young person, every child knowing that these careers exist. If you're not aware, you can't aim for that North Star. Then it's every child believing that they can attain that career if they graft and they've got the capability. Neither of those things are true at the moment. Then it's the access piece, that nepotism, but nepotism where all of us get to be nepotistic, where we get everybody in. And then for me, it's about, once you're in, who are the VCs? Who are the shareholders of these companies? Who are Now, it's not just about CEOs, because we know at the end of the day, if you're owned by a load of venture capitalists and they say, do you know what? Not liking the look of your return, can you just take the D&I budget out? Because that's going to give shareholders a little bit of a return. That is what will happen. And that is what happened last year. So for me, it's like, who holds the power? How do we change it? Or if you're a brand, stop giving your money to let unsavoury people and start giving your unsavoury people. Give your money to people that are doing the work. And if you're an unsavoury person, you're still going to want a bit of pie, so you're going to start doing the work. You're going to do it performatively, but I don't really care how you do it, as long as you do it. Because whether you want to do it or not, as long as it's done, that's it. Yeah. That was a bit of a rant, wasn't it? Sorry.
No, it's good. I love it. So tell us what would be great before we sort of come to the questions is, obviously 8 years in, we've talked a little bit about some of the struggles and obviously the people around you now and having that board. Are there key people on your journey that have been played a role and helped mentor? Because from the sounds of things, you knew the industry, you knew the space, but setting up an education platform and all of the things, who were the people that you turned to through that?
Do you know what? There's so many, and I would feel a bit aggrieved if I didn't name all of them. So I'm going to, do you know, I mean, there's so many at different stages people have lent in. And the best thing about what we do is, even if you've only got a bit of a time 1 year, you're always going to be part of the family. You know, Lachlan Williams at Anomaly, when he was on furlough, do you remember those good old days? So when I set the academy up, the whole furlough thing meant people could work for me for free because they were being paid by other people but not allowed to work for them. So he actually created the whole of the academy curriculum around employment. Then I've got my trustees are, Myers Lamptey of the Barbershop. I've got Jenna Rosner from Meta. I've got Caroline Forbes from Clear Channel and Ben Major from Uncommon. And they, along with lots of other wonderful people, are really useful when I feel a bit low and vulnerable, which, believe it or not, does happen because I am a human being, not a human doing all the time. There's so many people, like all of our partners have put stuff in the pot, whether that's inventory to reach people, whether that's, say, we get pro bono PR, we get pro bono law. We live at Mother's HQ and they let us stay there for free. So this is very much a cast of incredible advocates and allies that is at a scale of hundreds all putting in, and that makes things much easier because I just have to focus on paying staff rather than anything else.
But also that gives a real sense of momentum because, like we said, coming into the industry years ago, being one of 3 women on the floor. Let's not even talk about all the other metrics of diversity, which I'm sure were absent at that point.
Horrendous,
But to see so much of the industry show up and participate in different ways and support, that gives me hope, I guess, about where we're going.
Do you know what? I've got this phrase where I go, it's like being bathed in hope. Because it is. Like some people, like my team will be like, oh God, that partner may not renew. And I will be like, it's a miracle we're even here. which is probably not the kind of thing somebody driving revenue should say. I think it's a really hopeful thing. The fact we're here, the fact we're doing well, the fact that other people are doing the same space doing well, the fact that this is something we're talking about and it's part of what people do is really good. Yes, 2023 saw a big defunding of a lot of DE&I projects, but lots of people didn't defund them. And I think that's the really good thing. Stick with the people who've got your back. You don't need to win over the whole world. You just need to win over enough people to stay alive.
And what are some of your biggest highlights, I guess, in those 8 years? It'd be because
do you know, it's seeing some of the talent be promoted. We've got people who've won awards or on second, first jobs. We've got people who, I'll talk about Chris now. So Chris was a nail tech round here. She'd done one at uni, and she bumped into somebody who'd done Brixton, and she said, well, you should do it. So she gave it a go, and she ended up winning a marketing internship at KFC for a year. And I stole her back to be community manager for 2 years, and she even upskilled, and now she's doing brand marketing at the BBC. Now she came over from Bulgaria when she was 12, no English speaking, classic family. Her mum, I think, is a cleaner. Her dad's a security guard. She's the first person to go to uni. She did well at uni, worked really hard, took on all that debt. But obviously when she left, working 3 jobs, nail tech, whatever, no connections. It's that classic socially mobile person does well, falls off a cliff. And I think with Brixton Finishing School, a finishing school is supposed to be a bridge between two worlds. That's what it was when ladies used to wander around with books on their head. It was a bridge between academia and marriage. Whereas with us, it's a bridge between what happens when you finish your education and this weird bit that happens before you can get a job if you don't have a network. So that's amazing. We had our 5th birthday party and that was incredible. I mean, even today, sat here, like talking to you, that's a miracle, isn't it? Who would have thought that? You know?
There's a lot of fanboys and girls in the Elevate community of what you're doing, and you, honestly, people have been following you for ages, and we know there's some massive fans and believers and those that are passionate. And I think the passion piece, just we're sat here with smiles on our faces and things like that, because whilst a bit off the wall and a bit nutty, some of the comments and otherwise and things, it's bloody brilliant. And that passion, that energy, this kind of thirst for life, it's infectious.
Yeah.
And I think there's no denying that actually when you're putting your mind to it as a grafter, as a, you know, someone with a bit of chat and things like that what you've done, it's no surprise. And I think it's incredible. I think really proud of it. I think it's amazing.
I also think we should normalise being slightly eccentric, because everybody is. It's just most people think they have to tone their inner light down to fit in. Actually, if you're unapologetically yourself and hold that line, most people just will go, oh, God, all right then. I'll have to put up with you.
All the people around you are the right ones, because those that don't want to be around you will bugger off.
Well, this is it. I always say with my sort of like, you know, the people on those icy white planets, you know, when I walk into a room, if people walk away, I'm like, well, that's done me a favour.
Pluto. Neptune.
Yeah, exactly. Lifeless planets. Yeah.
So with that then being said, we'll lose the Plutos and things, we'll keep the lively planets here. For anyone that is listening to this, or that might know someone or other Chris's in the world and things like that, and obviously it's synonymous as why we do this, that one thing, what's the one piece of advice, so good or bad, that if you did get to have that chat with your younger self, what would that be? Or if you met anyone else, actually, for that matter.
I think, so definitely just keep on going. It doesn't matter how many times it goes wrong, as long as you get up and carry on. There will come a point where, as long as you keep getting up, you'll be up. I think that's it. But be really kind to yourself. I got this card that's my friend, actually Jenna, one of the trustees, gave me, which she said, a wise woman once said, fuck this shit. And she lived happily ever after. But yeah, just keep on going and be kind to yourself.
Brilliant.
Thank you so much.
Oh, no, thank
really
you.
Really appreciate it. It's been great having you.
I'm going to have to read your book, Mel. Yeah, we should plug your book. Yeah. Love to read it.
So how did you think that was?
Just another mind-blowing guest, really. Just her energy, passion, and yes, she talks about her neurodiversity, but just that drive. Like, she called herself a hustler. But I don't know if I'd necessarily use the same words, and we haven't seen that bit of her, but just that energy to get up and go and to challenge and to fight and to see something that you think is not quite right and going and making a difference.
Being
and trying
brave
to do
about it, right?
Yeah, but also, and we were talking a little bit about this in sort of saying goodbye to Ali, but just the tenacity and the belief that one person can make a difference and going out there and doing whatever that difference is, whatever that bit is. And, you know, she didn't start Brixton Finishing School with the idea of hundreds of thousands of people, but she started it with I want to change this and I want to make a difference. And just look where that has taken her. And in 8 years, it's remarkable.
Yeah. 24 people, I think she said, was the first one. And then on to now over 100,000 people in the coming year, 2 years and things like that, which is incredible. And I think when you have someone like that has this kind of blind drive, and I say blind because she calls it her own naivety and this blinkered effect, but this sense that she has been taught to, the fact that she had to pay for half her birthday presents to drive that work ethic. You mentioned there about the role of a parent or influencers or mentors in some regard, that actually it's that then that teaches you these fundamentals at an early age and what's right, what's wrong, for it to then come through in her later years once she's had her career to an effect, not over by any means, but once that she has helped or her child, that dependency piece is gone, frees up this opportunity for her to go and do something and make a difference. And she's got the moral ethics, this activism piece that she says, to go and do something about it. Because it is that it's someone challenging you. What are you doing about it? And she is a pretty impressive little powerhouse when she called herself the little kind of powerhouse to it, that I think it's just the authenticity around it and this passion and drive. It's incredible. Her story's incredible. The conversation was incredible.
Yeah, I think a couple of things will really stay with me from Ali's conversation. One, just the importance and power of the stories that are in your head and those early influences. Her dad's being a feminist and telling her that she can, and her never thinking that anything other than that. Just the importance of that. And I think the second piece is, doesn't matter where you start and your lot in life. And I think you and I would both resonate. We came from not too dissimilar backgrounds to Ali as well. And some of that graft and fear of, there is no safety net, as Ali said, and where that takes you, and just seeing the kind of impact you can have and the changes you can make. And I think for me, those are two of the really big takeaways from this.
Yeah, I've got loads, but fundamentally there is no other way other than forward, whatever's going on, but it is.
Yeah.
And that resilience and all those other things to it. But I agree. Lovely conversation and a brilliant new tequila drinking partner to hear more of those stories. So yeah, fab. Elevate operates thanks to the generosity of our partners and supporters. See the show notes to find out more about them.
Together, we're changing lives, careers and the events industry for the better. Our producer is Peter Kerwood and our sound and mix engineer is Matteo Margarelio.